Well, before we start our interview, I just wanted to give you an update as to our producers, our donors who support this program. And I wanted to read out some names who have supported us on Cash App. We have David M., who is a new supporter. We have Joseph C., Samuel L. Thank you very much. That was very generous. And in terms of Zelle, we have William W., we have Adam D., Michael L., Lyndon H., Kenneth C., Susan L., Christopher S., thank you very much. I appreciate that. Jonathan M., Beth Ellen B., Craig M., Susan L. again, thank you, and Rose G. and Daniel C. Thank you very much. And just to give you an idea of where we are, we're just shy of the 50% mark here at about the middle of the month. So thank you so much for your support. Those of you who gave us support on Cash App and on Zelle. And thank you so much for those of you who support us on Subscribestar and via mail and checks. We put all that stuff together, and that's where we are right now, just about halfway through the month. We're pretty close to being caught up, just a shade shy of that. But thank you so much for your support. And now for our interview. Joining us today is Lenny McAllister. He has a book that just was released today. I'm honored that he's going to come on our show to talk about this. The book is A Venn Diagram of One. And you can find it anywhere that books are sold. I just asked him that before we went on air. It is distributed by Simon & Schuster from a smaller publisher, Frederick Douglass Books. And he talks about what is happening in terms of political realignment in this country. He's looking at it from the perspective of many black adults leaving the Democrat Party over the last few years. And where are they going? Are they going to the Republican Party? So we want to talk to him about that, because I think we are living in a time right now. He had an op-ed piece recently on the New York Post where he was talking about the Civil War. And I think we're living in a time very much like that. Thank you for joining us, Mr. McAllister.
I appreciate being here, kind sir. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that stuck out to me when I read your op-ed piece in the New York Post, you said the tectonic plates had been moving in America for quite some time before the Civil War actually broke out. And I think we're living in a time like that as well. I think we see a lot of tectonic plates that are moving. What do you see happening?
I see the same, David. I see that we're at a point in time where things are shifting underneath our feet. There's a lot of instability that people are feeling. A lot of younger generations in particular believe that the American dream is no longer viable for them, whether it's economically or just culturally. Mm-hmm. And so part of what I wrote about in that commemorative edition back during America 250 was that we've gone through these periods of time before. And if we can have faith both in our spiritual sense, faith in God, faith in what we worship and what we believe in regardless of denomination, mm-hmm. but also secular faith in America, in the American dream, in our resilience to be better as a nation, to be a more perfect union with each generation. If we can have those two lanes in faith and stay on that path, that combined path of faith, we can get past the division, we can get past our current malaise, and we can be the next iteration of a more perfect union in the days ahead.
That's right. What we do is we keep the stuff that worked and we try to get rid of the things that don't belong there.
Exactly.
And it's an incremental thing rather than a revolution. I'm concerned that we're going to have a revolution, though. Talk a little bit about what happens with the black adults that have left the Democrat Party. You said they didn't become Republicans, they just left. So what are they doing?
They're looking for solutions. Uh-huh. They're looking for solutions like all other Americans are. They want to see solutions that work for them. They want to see politicians that represent them on a regular basis, and they want to be able to feel as though they're back in a partnership. This is supposed to be a representative form of government, but people are feeling more and more detached from the political leaders that they elect. So African Americans, much like younger generations of Americans, regardless of their color or creed, they're looking for representative government that's going to represent their needs, represent their vision, and represent where they want the country to go moving forward.
I agree. Yeah, they're increasingly looking predatory as opposed to partnership as you look at it. You know, you start with a quote from Frederick Douglass, the 4th of July quote, the very famous one from Frederick Douglass. You know, when we talk about different parties and independents. I talked earlier today to Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, and he was talking about the fact that in Massachusetts, where he's running for office, he said 67% of the people there identify as independents. He said, we think of it as a blue state, but it's only really about 20 some odd percentage of people that identify as Democrats, and the Republicans are in single digits. But he said 67% of the people are independents. Is that what you're seeing in the black community?
We're seeing that all across America, not just the black community, but in the exhausted middle, those American voters that I wrote a Venn diagram of one for. Let's go back to Massachusetts for just a second. People forget that if you look at several of the last gubernatorial administrations, they were Republican, despite what we think of as a blue state in regards to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. People just want solutions. And as we're realizing, there's an exhausted middle in America. People that are tired of the partisan fighting, they want political and policy solutions, and they want leadership regardless of what the partisan label is. The most expansive part of our electorate these days are those that are identifying as independent voters. And they're doing that because they're sick of the partisan fighting. They're looking for solutions. And that's part of what I wrote about in a Venn diagram of one. We need more people that are statesmen and leaders that can talk to all factions of our country.
Now, when we're talking about a Venn diagram of one, what are you referring to? I mean, I usually look at it as a uniparty on so many different critical issues. Of course, there are legitimate differences between Republicans and Democrats, but on so many vital issues, we seem to have a Venn diagram of one, but you probably meant something else by that. Tell us what you meant by it.
That Venn diagram where we overlap, where there are certain common values that we have as Americans that have been around for 250 years, regardless of color or creed, regardless if you're an East Coaster, West Coaster, or you're in quote-unquote flyover country. That Venn diagram describes not only my life experience with all the different things that I've done, from the RNC and the Tea Party to the NAACP and Rainbow Push Coalition, while keeping my principles in place, but it also defines America. We are an overlapping of cultures from Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Africa, Central America, Asia. They've come together, and with each generation of Americans, we have redefined what American means while also keeping these core values of liberty and freedom in place so that people can have that pursuit of happiness that our founding documents promised us.
Yes, and so, of course, when we talk about it, the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and you began your piece there with a quote from Frederick Douglass on the 250th anniversary. It's a great document. Unfortunately, I can't find myself in there. When we look at that, what are the core principles as you see it for this country?
The ones that I talked about, us going back to an Venn diagram of one, and again, books available today, and thank you for having me here to talk about it, are three in particular: security, empowerment, and opportunity. Security in one's citizenship, security in one's personhood, and security in one's potential to pursue happiness as they see fit. Empowerment. Empowerment through education, knowledge of self as a child of God, and then academic knowledge. Entrepreneurial empowerment, the ability to invent and reinvent oneself in order to continue to pursue happiness. And then economic empowerment as well, to be able to participate in free market principles in our society. And then, of course, opportunity, the ability to hope, act, and pivot. You can hope for something better, you can act upon a plan, and then you can pivot if the first, second, or third plan doesn't work. David, we have forgotten that America is a second act nation. It's full of biographies of people that did not succeed with their first time around, but through a second act made America better. Everybody from George Washington to Abraham Lincoln to the everyday people in our communities have gone through first and second acts in politics, business, academia, and the like. And because we have facilitated that, America's gotten better. We have to get back to those principles to allow people to have second acts to move through these divisions in these contemporary times to be better moving ahead.
I agree. I see, when I look at it, though, I kind of back from cheering for government because it seems like in so many different ways they're shutting down those opportunities for us, whether it's a second act or even a first act. We've got doors that are being closed as they seem to want to exercise absolute total control over everything that we do, watching everything that we do. What do we do about that? To me, that seems to be the vital issue. Maybe you don't see it that way. What do you see in terms of obstructing our ability to have a second act or even a first act? How do we open up that liberty that's there?
We remember that the Constitution is protecting God given rights. It's not granting anything, it's
Mm-hmm.
protecting God given rights. And so when we remember what the purpose of the Constitution is, and that who the author of those rights really is, we can then lean on our faith. We can lean on the spiritual faith because we know who the absolute author is. But we can also lean on our secular faith that we have constitutional protections that allow us to be the authors of our lives, us to be the ones that are writing the chapters of our story, our individual story, but then combined together into the American story. That's what we have to get back to. We don't need more government getting in the way of that. We
Mm-hmm.
need government understanding its place and its purpose so that we can craft those stories ourselves and be successful therein.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just I talked a little bit this last week about Dinesh D'Souza in terms of an op-ed piece that he just recently put out, and he was trying to defend the founders from the charges of hypocrisy because they were talking about independence and liberty, and yet they were not focused on slavery. And that is something I see a lot of conservatives do. And yet the reality is that what they were trying to do at that point in time, certainly many of them were involved hypocritically in slavery. But as Jefferson said, we got a wolf by the ears. What do we do to undo this institution that we inherited? And how do we do that without a major upheaval? Well, they didn't find a way to do it without a major upheaval. But nevertheless, when you look at what the intention of the Declaration of Independence was, they neither had the authority to free any slaves. It was really about trying to free themselves from government that was oppressive. And that was the first step. You first have got to get government away, and then you can start to move to other areas. It seems like where we are right now, we have a government that desires, whether you're looking at the Republicans or Democrats, it seems like there's an overreaching desire to watch and to control everything that we do. And it seems to me like there is an unholy alliance between government and and I'm talking about major corporations. I'm not anti-business. I'm certainly not anti-free market, but I'm against crony capitalism. And so when I look at this, I see this connection to between government and corporations that I find very troubling because they outsource so many of the things that they're prohibited from doing to government, to corporations, and say, well, that's not us doing it, it's the corporations doing it. How do you see that? Or do you see it that way?
We have to get back to trusting the American people again, David. When you trust the American people, then you trust the free market. If you trust the American people, then you trust the communities of America more than you trust American government, whether it's local, state, or federal. We don't trust the American people the way we used to. And just the same, the American people have a jaundiced eye towards government because both have been put in lanes that do not belong to them. We have to get government back in its own lane again. It has to be able to be a guiding force, a protector of rights, not one that deems rights or designates rights or sets the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Just the same, we have to go back to trusting the American people and saying, we're going to give you the empowerment necessary to find your way in America. Define your definition of the American dream. And there are plenty of different ways to define it, but we're not going to get in the way of it. As long as you don't infringe upon somebody else's property or somebody else's quality of life in regards to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of their own, we're going to empower you along the way. We have stopped doing that. We have to get back to the trust of the American people. And in a Venn diagram of one, I remind us that when we do that, whether you've been a poor kid that grew up during the Jim Crow era of the South, or you grew up in the western part of the United States as an Asian American immigrant, you can find the American dream. But you have to make sure that those protections are in place and everybody understands their true role in the American fabric.
I agree. And when I think it comes to getting government back into its lane, I think its lane is to protect our God-given liberties. That's what the Declaration of Independence said. I really believe that is a wise position for the government. When we look at what the government is doing, one of the things that, as you're talking about this, we have to trust the American people. I think that is the key issue when we talk about freedom of speech. We have so many people who are so upset about social media, and it's like, well, look, if people are free to say whatever they want, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to say things that you don't like. Just grow up and deal with it, or go out there and debate them if you really don't like what they're having to say. But to me, free speech is really about trusting the American people to be able to sort out what is true and what is false, and what is loving and what is hateful, or whatever. We don't need the government to do that type of thing. What we need the government to do is to make sure that corporations aren't going to restrict that. And in many cases, we have the government is essentially behind the scenes telling the social media companies to shut it down. What do you think about that?
I think that we have to get back to faith, the guiding principle of who we are. So what we need to get back to is this. We need to get back to a point in time where faith comes into play and guides our principles and how we do things. The Bill of Rights, those rights that are enjoined in the Bill of Rights, including freedom of speech. Corporations are not supposed to be guiding our ethics and our morality when it comes to that. It's supposed to be our individual faith in God, but also in what America is supposed to be. When we have a healthy faith, and it's a strong faith, we can self-police ourselves. We can have really tough and robust debates, but still stay within pocket. When we're counting on another institution to provide those guardrails for us, one, we are no longer empowered, and number two, the rules are being dictated to us. That is not what America is supposed to be. But we have to strengthen our faith, spiritually and secularly, in order to find those guardrails once again, so that we can move down the path together once again.
Well, I agree with that. So when you look at the third party that Tucker Carlson is talking about, for example, have you looked at his 10-point manifesto? Do you have any opinion about that? It's kind of generalized, but what do you think about that? And what do you think about the opportunity for a third party? We have so many people who are registered now as independent, so many people who, as you pointed out, you got a lot of the black community and a lot of people of every community who have left one party or the other, and they're essentially politically homeless, and they don't want to be associated with either one of the two parties. Many of them would like to have a third party. What do you think about what Tucker Carlson and company are doing with that?
Very directly, David, we have to bring politics back to the people. It can no longer be for big money. It can no longer be for only the affluent. Mm-hmm. We have to bring politics back to the people. Once we do that, whether it's a third party, a fourth party, a fifth party, we'll be able to get a higher level of talent back into politics. We'll have more competitive elections rather than these gerrymandered districts where we already know the outcome months in advance. And we'll be able to then substantively have real debates over what are the policy solutions that will defend liberty, but also solve the problem. If you have solutions that solve the problem and infringe upon liberty, it's still a problem. You need talented statesmen, talented leaders that can protect liberty and solve the problem. And the way to do that is to start bringing politics back to the people, where the people mean more than the money in politics.
I agree. Yeah, unfortunately, we're kind of we're out of stock on statesmen, I think, at this point in time in our country.
But David, here's the truth. If you look back at the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, we didn't have a lot of statesmen back then. We had a dearth of statesmanship. And then by the time you got to the 1860s, you had abolitionists, you had Lincoln, you had the radical Republicans, you had others that were fighting for a better America. You look back at the 1920s going into the Great Depression. We didn't have a whole lot of statesmanship then. Then you had FDR and other leaders emerging. Same with the Civil Rights era. Same with going from the 70s and the malaise going into the 1980s with Reagan and the Reagan Revolution, the Republican Revolution, and the different era of the 90s. So we are going through that iteration again. Statesmanship will come back into vogue. Leadership will come back into vogue, because if there's anything we've been able to count on for 250 years in America, is that statesmanship and leadership will come back into vogue.
Well, yeah, nature hates a vacuum, and we certainly got a vacuum in Washington right now. We got a giant sucking sound, I guess, as Ross Perot called it, but it's not just about money or manufacturing. is really about character and statesmanship. And so, yeah, somebody will step into that vacuum. I agree with you about that. Well, very interesting concept, a Venn diagram of one. And again, you can find that book wherever any books are sold. And thank you so much for joining us. The author is Lenny McAllister. Thank you, Lenny. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, David. You have a wonderful day, and God bless you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Past to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at davidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. davidknightshow.com.